So now that we've completed looking at the Autobots from the 1985 catalog, we'll move on to the Decepticons. And the first subgroup of Decepticons that we come to are the Constructicons. Now, there are a number of things that are notable about the Constructicons. Firstly, they were the first subgroup to be a combiner. So what this means is that in this case, there were 6 individual Decepticons that had both a robot and a vehicle form, and they were able to combine together into one giant robot, in this case with the name Devastator. Now, this is a reissue of the 1985 Devastator toy in its combined form, and I have a couple of remakes of it. This one came out first, and this was part of the toy lines associated with the Unicron trilogy of cartoons. So he does have some Energon stars on him. He's a little bit different, and I'll talk about him a little bit more. And then this is the main Devastator from my collection, which Hasbro came out with, and is very large and very nicely similar to the original Devastator toy. Now, Devastator being the first of the combiners, later combiners would have a very similar approach to how they're put together, with a single body and 4 appendages, very similar to, let's say, Voltron, right? 5 robots that come together. Devastator was a little bit different in that he does have 2 arms, 2 legs, but then he has kind of a body, and then one of the Constructicon's hook makes up sort of the top part of the body, or where the head attaches, as opposed to the main part. And again, differing from some of the later combiners that would come out, you had really kind of a non-standard mechanism to how the pieces fit together, and so sometimes they're a little bit easy to come apart, whereas the later ones had a very kind of similar approach to how they connected from one set to another. Now, one of the things that's interesting about Devastator, right, is just the sort of dichotomy of his personality. Each one of his component robots and the Constructicons that make him up is a construction vehicle. But put them all together and you get this massive robot that only destroys things, and has the name Devastator. So that's kind of interesting how that all fits together. In the original 6 Constructicons, there were Bone Crusher, Hook, Mixmaster, Long Haul, Scrapper, and Scavenger. So that's the ones that make up this toy, and also this toy. This other one is a little bit different. It has only 5 component parts, and 4 of them are originals: Scavenger, Long Haul, Bone Crusher, and Scrapper. But the 5th one, actually, this leg, is one called Hightower. So that's a little bit different. Now, in G1, Devastator did have his own motto, separate from his individual components, which was "Thinking and winning do not mix." And this is something we see with all of the combiners, maybe a little bit less with Computron, but as they get bigger and come together, they get dumber. So whereas the individual Constructicons were kind of, normal intelligence for a transformer, you put them together and you get a big robot that can't speak in complete sentences, but is very willing to go around and destroy a lot of stuff. The Constructicons were seen quite a lot in the early G1 Transformers cartoon, and versions of them have been seen in later cartoons. This one, actually, though it's sold as Devastator, on the cartoon was known as Constructicon Maximus, where a lot of the combiners, the cartoons in that area, had Maximus in their name. So that's one thing to note about him. In the cartoon, the Constructicons had a bit of a continuity issue around their creation. When they're first introduced into the series, Megatron says something about how it was worth the time it took to build them. However, in a later episode, we see them having some shared history with Omega Supreme dating back to the pre-war days of Cybertron. So where exactly they came from or how they came to be, maybe there's a little bit of discontinuity around that. But we will go through each of the individual Constructicons and talk about them. But definitely Devastator. He is one of the coolest, and he gave the Decepticons a bit of an advantage, being the first ones to have a combiner and build this big robot form. It was always difficult for the Autobots to handle him when they had to go into battle. It would often go up against the Dinobots, them not having combined form, but still being very powerful. You kind of match with Devastator. And what you kind of had to do was hit him or blast him hard enough to knock his pieces apart and knock him back into his component robot form, and then you could beat Devastator. But it wasn't easy, right? He was always very difficult for the Autobots to handle. And it's also an interesting note that within the toys and the characters that make up the G1 Transformers, there's always more Autobots than there are Decepticons, but combiners is one area where the Decepticons sort of got ahead early and stayed ahead, and overall have more combiners, kind of on their roster than the Autobots ever did. So that's just one advantage that the Constructicons started applying for the Decepticons. The first of the individual Constructicons is the dump truck long haul. This is a reissue of the original long haul toy in its dump truck form, and this is the remake of long haul from my main Devastator in my main collection. The original coloration of the Constructicons was all green and purple, predominantly green for the vehicle parts, and it was a pretty cool coloration for these Transformers. Long Haul's function is listed as transport, and his motto is a battlefront is only as good as its supply line. Often in the G1 show, you would see the Constructicons working together to build something. And of course, they'd be loading up Long Haul and he'd be taking things away. But according to his bio, he kind of doesn't like his role as a transport specialist and wishes to be more of a warrior. But, he's pretty cool looking if you like construction vehicles. Long Haul, the dump truck. The next Constructicon is the front-end loader Scrapper. This is the reissue of Scrapper in his original G1 vehicle form, and here is the Scrapper from my main Devastator in his robot mode. Scrapper's function is listed as construction engineer, and I love his motto. It is, "My work is a monument to and of my enemies," meaning that he would tend to destroy some Autobots and then build something out of them. That's a little bit gruesome. In the combined form of Devastator, he formed the right leg, and so he was kind of a foot with this part of his vehicle form becoming the foot. So it gave a pretty distinctive appearance to that part of Devastator. So that was a pretty cool role that Scrapper played. The next Constructicon is the construction crane known simply as Hook. This is the reissue of the G1 Hook with his extendable crane attachment. And this is the robot form of Hook in the remake with also a hook attachment that goes on his back there. Hook's function is listed as surgical engineer, and his motto is strive for perfection even if others must suffer. And that's how the bio describes him, is as a perfectionist to the point of being annoying to others. In the combined Devastator form, his kind of length enabled him to become the top of Devastator to which the head would attach. So kind of the two-part body that Devastator had, he was at the top of it, and the crane part was kind of coming out of Devastator's shoulder. So that was another kind of distinctive appearance that Devastator had and that Hook contributed to. The next Constructicon in the list is Mixmaster. Mixmaster was the cement mixer on the Constructicon team. This is what he looked like in his original G1 form, this being the reissue. And this is him in robot form in the later version from my main collection. Mixmaster's um, function is listed as materials fabrication, and his motto is how strong the steel, how quick the conquest. So Mixmaster played a kind of a special role on the team in the G1 cartoon, and he could create things, liquids, within his mixing chamber, not just cement, but anything that was needed. And he could also kind of extrude that from these nozzles that were on top of his head in robot form. And so this is something that was useful in various episodes where he could do something special and create something to have some effect in a battle against the Autobots. I also think he may be the only Transformer to have such a distinctive vehicle appearance. Something as specific as a cement mixer is pretty unique among the Transformers. The next of the Constructicons is the backhoe known as Scavenger. This is the reissue of Scavenger in his backhoe form, and this is a Scavenger in robot form from the remake of Devastator. Scavenger's function is listed as mining and salvage, and his motto is everything is worth something, even me. So with the name Scavenger, his personality and kind of actions, as the bio describes, are driven by finding and gathering things, and that goes along with his function of mining and salvage. Mentions he has very low self-esteem, kind of captured in his motto there, and doesn't think very highly of himself. But he is one of the cooler looking, even of the Constructicons, with this backhoe form and these tank treads that he has. So, despite what he may think, I think Scavenger is pretty cool. The last of the Constructicons is the Bulldozer Bone Crusher. This is a reissue of Bone Crusher in his vehicle form, and this is Bone Crusher from the remake in his robot form. Bone Crusher has the distinction being the only of the Constructicons that I owned originally. So this is an original G1 Bone Crusher in vehicle form. Now, one of the things that you could do with the Constructicons, they mostly came with different attachments that were mostly for when they combined into Devastator, but you could also usually attach them in vehicle form, and this could function as a sort of added weapon. So he had this cool kind of shooting screw missile that you could attach to the top of Bone Crusher. I also think he had the coolest name out of the individual Constructicons. His function is listed as demolitions, and his motto is hit it till it stands no taller than dust. And that's kind of what his bio describes him as just very destructive, and what you would expect from someone with a function of demolitions. The bio here has a funny sentence where it says, subject is often buried in the rubble of his own manic demolitions. He is not very intelligent. So that's what it says about Bone Crusher, or maybe Bonehead, if you want to think about him that way. The next Decepticon from the 1985 catalog is the one known as Shockwave. Shockwave was definitely one of the coolest looking Decepticons. In his robot form, he had this distinctive eye, single eye, as well as his left arm was just a cannon. So those were some things that made him look really cool. Now, what I have here is an original 1985 Shockwave toy. It is unfortunately broken in that part of the gun has detached from the gun body, but it is still functional. So Shockwave had light and sound features. And so if I go ahead and pull his trigger, you can see and hear one of two sounds that he could make. There's a switch on the back here to switch to his other mode. And that's the other sound it makes. And that's actually pretty impressive given how old this toy is, that it's still working. His gun mode was also really cool looking, and of course the lights and sounds made it pretty cool as well. It had this flip up sight that you could pretend you were using. So all in all, a really cool toy. Now, what's impressive, it does work perfectly. Now, it actually worked a little bit with this battery that was in there since the 80s. So I guess, that's how long an Energizer can last. In addition to that toy, I also have this, which was one of the earlier remakes of Shockwave, which, captures his significant features, but isn't perfectly matched to the G1 appearance. And then I have this one from the Commander line. He was one of the few from that toy line, and this is the only Commander line that I use in my main collection, just because it is so spot on with his G1 appearance. So that's pretty cool as well. And then here's a version that came out with Earthspark. He was a pretty big character in that show. Not Earthspark, Cyberverse. That's the one. So Shockwave's function is listed as Military Operations Commander, And his motto is clarity of thought before rashness of action. And that's very much how he's portrayed, both in the G1 cartoon and various other appearances that he has. Very logical, very unfeeling of a character. And on the G1 show, his function, he was kind of in charge of the Decepticon forces on Cybertron. So whereas Megatron and the rest of the Decepticons were on Earth, he was in charge of things there. And one of the funniest, I think unintentionally funniest moments in the entire show is when he establishes contact with Megatron after 4 million years and is just like, hey, what are your orders? Like, as if no time had passed at all. It was, kind of hilarious. But he's actually, in a lot of his incarnations, is the Decepticons' main scientist. A little bit of like a mad scientist, but more of like a Dr. Frankenstein, like really cruel and unfeeling towards his test subjects and performing all kinds of just sort of horrible experiments on other Transformers. So in that way, Shockwave is very very evil in that sense, but definitely one of the coolest Transformers, one of the coolest Decepticons that there are. So next we come to one of the least frequently seen subgroups of Decepticons, and these are the ones known as the Deluxe Insecticons. In contrast to the non-Deluxe Insecticons, which were seen quite frequently, the 4 Deluxe Insecticons are essentially unused. They definitely never appeared in the G1 cartoon, and I don't think they appeared in the comic book, at least not very much either, and have not been seen in many of the later comic books either, or additional cartoon series. So I'm not sure what explains why they were so absent throughout the history of Transformers. And like the deluxe vehicles of the Autobots, at least those ones appeared in the comic books. Though they weren't present in the cartoon, and have been seen in later shows and series. The Deluxe Insecticons still are just absent throughout Transformers history. I'm not sure why that is, but after many years, they have finally put out, let's say, most or all of the Deluxe Insecticons in toy form. So here is the first of the Deluxe Insecticons, Barrage, in his remake form. In his vehicle mode, he transformed into a rhinoceros beetle. So all of the Insecticons and Deluxe Insecticons had somewhat cool alternate forms. His function is listed as Gunner, and his motto is nothing left standing means nothing left to chance. So again, this is one where we have to rely mostly on the bio to know much about him. The bio lists him as kind of a relentless and merciless warrior, really into fighting and destroying all of the Autobots that he can. And so that's about as much as we have to know about Barrage. The next of the deluxe Insecticons is the stag beetle known as Chop Shop. Unlike other of the deluxe Insecticons, Chop Shop has been made a few times, but for various reasons. The first Chop Shop was this very small one. It does have these distinctive looking mandibles, but he came in a pack with a Megatron figure. There was also this one, which is actually a reskin of a Kickback figure, but done in his distinctive color. It does look a little bit like the G1 Chop Shop, but this is the much better remake that has since come out, and is pretty good looking in how closely it comes to the G1 appearance. His function is listed as thief, which is interesting, and his motto is, "I take no prisoners, just spare parts." His bio describes him as an unrepentant kleptomaniac. So someone had some fun writing his bio, but that's what we know about Chop Shop. He likes to take things and steal things. Our next deluxe Insecticon is the Locust, known as Ransack. This is the remake of Ransack, which, again, this one is a reskin of a Kickback that was made. So even in their remakes, the kind of impetus for making some of these deluxe Insecticons is that there was already an actual Insecticon figure that they could remake and reuse to create one of these characters. His function is listed as warrior, and his motto is, "The sight of ruin only makes me crave more." His bio describes him as another one of the deluxe Insecticons who's just, fixated on battle and destruction and war and killing and all of that. Now, while, like the other deluxe Insecticons, we don't see this version of Ransack throughout the Transformers franchise. The name has been reused a few times, that at least that I'm aware of. This is a G2 Ransack from Rotor Force, which obviously has no relation to the original other than the name. There was also a Ransack in Transformers Cybertron who was along with Crumple Zone, played the sort of comic relief Decepticons, and he transformed into a motorcycle. So while, Ransack the Deluxe Insecticon hasn't been seen much, at least his name has gotten a little bit of use. So there is one more deluxe Insecticon, and his name is Venom. His alternate form is that of a cicada, and here we enter a bit of a gray area as to whether a Venom figure has ever been remade or not. This is the closest thing to a Venom remake. And I say that it was packaged along with another later Decepticon called Spinister, and in that it went by the name of Venin rather than Venom. So is it actually a Venom just with a different name, or is it someone else? Um, as far as his appearance goes, in robot form and coloration, it's really not very similar to the original Venom. The face, not similar either. However, in his alternate form, it is somewhat similar to the cicada form of the original Venom. Um, I've gone with kind of the online sources that I've found that do match this as a Venom and say, it is just a Venom figure with a different name. Um, the name Venom, these days being associated with the Spider-Man character of that name, they, maybe Hasbro wasn't able to reuse it. Why he looks so different from the original Venom is not entirely clear, but we're going to go ahead and assume that this is a Venom and not a hole in the collection. But it would be really nice if Hasbro would come out with a better Venom that matches the original. Now, his function is listed as psychological warfare, and his motto is, "Friends are more dangerous than enemies." So you can figure out what that means for the character of Venom. And, this hopefully is actually a Venom toy. So, as it turns out, just a couple of days after I finished recording my video on the Transformer Venom, Hasbro released on their shopping site a new version of a Venom action figure. It is going again by the name Venin, so that does confirm that the name change from Venom to Venin is the same character. And the new Venom figure looks exactly like the G1 Venom figure. So that confirms that that was the same character, just with a different name. So it does confirm that this figure with the name Venin corresponds to the G1 Venom figure, even though it doesn't look very similar, and it is the same character, but we will be getting a much nicer Venin in a few months. I got the pre-order, so be able to show that as soon as it arrives. But also in my video, I mentioned that this came with Spinister. It actually came with Acid Storm, so just wanted to correct that as well. The next subgroup of Decepticons that we come to in the 1985 catalog are the Triple Changers. What made a triple changer was that it would have two vehicle forms in addition to their one robot form. So each one could convert into two different types of vehicles. The first triple changer is this one, Astro Train. I was fortunate enough to have both triple changers in their original G1 forms. So this is an original G1 Astro Train in his train form. And this is the first remake of Astro Train that came out. There have been other newer and much bigger Astro Train remakes, but I always keep this one as the one in my main collection. This is from the very first line of Transformers remakes. It goes all the way back to 2006. Here's some packaging from that same time, and you can see on here what his train and space shuttle forms looked like in this reissue. But it's cool to have one from so long ago, right, rather than one of the newer remakes of Astro Train. Now, his function is listed as military transport. His motto is, "In confusion, there is opportunity." And that's a nod to his ability to take on multiple different forms and confuse an enemy in that way. Astro Train is one of the very few Transformers with a train form. I believe he was the only one in G1 until the train bots came out many years later, and they were Japanese only, so didn't come to the United States. So may have been the only train, one of several to have a space shuttle form, not the only one in that category. Astro Train was seen very frequently on the G1 cartoon as a transport, right? Everyone would load up into Astro Train in his space shuttle form and fly off to wherever they needed to go. And in the G1 cartoon movie, after the defeat of the Decepticons in the first big battle at Autobot City, everyone loads into Astro Train and they kind of limp off into the galaxy to escape from the Autobots. So Astro Train, he is one that you see a lot in the G1 cartoon. The second Decepticon triple changer from the 1985 catalog was Blitzwing. Blitzwing had the ability to transform into a tank as well as a jet fighter plane. This is an original G1 Blitzwing in its tank form, and you can see some parts that will form his nose cone when he turns into his jet mode. This is the first reissue. There have been others of Blitzwing. The original did come with a really cool purple sword, and that's part of this remake as well. You can see it there. Blitzwing's function is listed as Ground Air Commander, which is a little confusing, and his motto is Destroy First, Think Later. Like other tanks from the G1 era, he was, very much a dedicated warrior and wanting to be in battle and fight and things like that. I guess that's just kind of a shared personality that tanks had. Being a jet, he could often kind of mix in with the other Decepticon jets, of which there were many, but then he could also transform into a tank and do a lot of damage on the ground. It's a really cool tank gun, right? That was a lot of fun and very distinctive part of his appearance, and very large in the remake form as well. So those are a couple of things that make Blitzwing stand out. He did appear in the G1 cartoon as well, although he didn't play as big a role as Astro Train did, nor appear as frequently as him. In the 1985 catalog, 3 new Decepticon jets were introduced to be added to the 3 jets that came out in the 84 catalog. Since this was the most extensive redecoing of figures from the 2 toy lines, there was a slight modification made to the 85 sort of official transformation, just to give it a little bit of differentiation from the 84. Now, I don't have any of the original 85 toys or remakes, so I'm going to demonstrate on this Thundercracker. So this is what one of the jets from 84 would be transformed and look like in his robot form. But for the 85s, I went ahead and flipped up the cone. And so the head looked a little bit different, and that was kind of the one differentiation. And this would be reflected in how they were animated in the cartoon, with this, cone-looking head. And so these jets have earned the nickname of the Cone Heads, that being the 3 that came out in 85. The first of those, this is a remake of the Decepticon jet named Ramjet. And as you can see, even in this form, he has his cone flipped up in cone head form. Ramjet's function is listed just as warrior, and his motto is simply, if it flies, crash it. And going along with his motto and his name, that was his preferred tactic in battle, was simply to fly into an enemy and crash into them. So you can imagine Ramjet was not the brightest of the Decepticon jets, and after crashing himself many times, didn't get any brighter. But that's kind of the defining feature of Ramjet. The next of the 1985 Conehead Decepticon jets is Thrust. This is a remake of Thrust in his robot form. I always thought that Thrust was the coolest looking of the Decepticon jets, both because of his color, and the thing that differentiated him was these super sweet VTOL takeoff and landing jet parts that he had on his wings that made him special. So I was always really excited to get this Thrust figure. His function is listed as warrior, and his motto is, "My engine's roar is my enemy's song of doom." Other than that, there's not a lot to kind of differentiate or make Thrust very special. His name is reused in some of the other Transformers cartoons, particularly in the Unicron trilogy. And you do see some bots like him in Cyberverse, but this is the one that I always wanted as a child and never got. So getting the remake of him was very special. The third and final of the 1985 Decepticon Conehead jets is Dirge. This is a remake of the Dirge figure in his robot form. You can see, he has the familiar cone-shaped head. Also has his lower wings kind of flared out to the side, so another slight differentiation in how he appears in his robot form. His function is listed as warrior, and his motto is, "Fear is the element that unites all losers." Now, going along with his name of Dirge, his personality is described as morose, and he also has the ability to kind of make a sound that frightens his enemies, and that's what goes along with his motto, and kind of something of a special ability that he has that makes him a little bit special among the Coneheads. But Dirge is not often seen outside of G1 and the G1 cartoon, and so not one of the ones that has appeared in future Transformers franchises. The final group of Decepticons from the 1985 catalog are the Insecticons. These are just the regular Insecticons, not the deluxe Insecticons. The first one of these is Kickback, and he's been made a few times. This is a reissue of the original Kickback with all of its shiny metal-like appearance. And this is a very recently released Kickback that is virtually identical to the first one. This one comes from the movie line, so that's why it's so similar to the original G1. And here's what that one looks like in its robot form. There's a couple of larger remakes that have come out as well. This one is very similar in appearance to the G1 Insecticon of Kickback, and this mold has been used for at least one of the other Insecticons, one of the deluxe Insecticons that we looked at earlier. There's also this version of Kickback, which came as a part of one of the Transformers game toy line. So it's a little bit different looking, but it's also very cool looking as far as the appearance of the Kickback goes. His function is listed as espionage, and his motto is, "Friend is another word for fool." This is a grasshopper, by the way, with very powerful legs, hence the name Kickback, and his bio describes, how much force he can produce by using his very powerful legs. The Insecticons, in contrast to the deluxe Insecticons, were very frequently seen in the G1 cartoon as well as the movie, often appearing and descending and eating a lot of stuff, energon if they could find it. That was kind of how they were depicted, as just having a voracious appetite, and they spoke in a kind of strange, hard to describe voice, but kind of mechanical and organic at the same time, often repeating words in their sentences. So that was kind of distinctive about them as well. while being part of the Decepticons, they were also kind of pests. And even the Decepticons at times didn't like having them around just because they were kind of a nuisance. But they have been seen in some of the later Transformers cartoon series, at least in one form or another. So, the Insecticons, they're ones who've been seen, quite a bit throughout the Transformers franchises. The next of the regular Insecticons is the rhinoceros beetle named Bombshell. This is a remake of the original Bombshell. He definitely has one of the most distinctive appearances with this appendage that he has, and that comes and sort of sticks out of the top of his head in his robot form. Here's a few remakes of him. This one you can see in both its insect form and its robot form. And there's a couple of smaller remakes that have come out over the years as well. Bombshell's function is listed as psychological warfare, and his motto is "The mind is my playpen." And the name Bombshell is a little bit strange for an Insecticon. It doesn't seem to be very sort of insect themed, but in the show, what Bombshell could do, his sort of special power, is he could shoot a tiny little shell out of his appendage here, and that would lodge in a subject's brain, and then he could control them remotely, right? He would take control of their minds. And so that's kind of what the Bombshell name was referring to, that shell that he could shoot and take over someone's mind with. So that was a special power that he had. And I think that he was kind of the leader of the Insecticons. He certainly seemed that way, and with his mind controlling powers, it kind of lent themselves to that. So, yeah, he is one of the prominent Insecticons. The third and final Insecticon, and also the last new Decepticon from the 1985 catalog, was known as Shrapnel. Here is a remake of the original Shrapnel toy in its insect form. And here is, as you can see, a very similar looking one from the movie toy line remake of Shrapnel, very similar to his G1 appearance. Here also is a remake of Shrapnel as well. His insect form is that of a stag beetle, the same as the deluxe Insecticon Chop Shop, and so that's why this figure has been reused for Chop Shop in at least one instance. His function is listed as electric warfare, whatever that means, and his motto is "Control electricity and you control the world." I'm not sure what exactly that means, but he somehow uses electricity in fighting. I don't remember that really being explored in the show, but that's what the bio indicates about Shrapnel. He's one of the cool looking Insecticons with these big mandibles, but otherwise, and his he was the one that had the really weird speech pattern where he would repeat his last word and kind of trail off. A little bit spooky and a little bit weird. So he's maybe the creepiest of the Insecticons. So here we have collected all of the new Decepticons from the 1985 catalog. So 85 added a lot of new cool characters building on the start from 1984. Some of the real highlights being Shockwave and the Constructicons over on the Decepticon side. There were also some new toy mechanics that were introduced, specifically the concept of combiners and having multiple transformers combine into a larger one. as well as the triple changers in their ability to have two vehicle forms and the single robot form. So this is a trend we'll see as we get deeper into the years of Transformers, where there are different play mechanics, different things that the Transformers can do, different characteristics that they have, and that's something that we'll be exploring as we start to look through more of the years of the Transformers toys.